For those of you online, we will get started shortly. Thank you for your patience. We're going to give it about another minute or two. Please make your way to your seats. If you'd like to make a public comment, please sign in now. For folks online, if you'd like to make a public comment, please put your name in the chat at this time. We've got a couple open seats up front. Please make yourself comfortable. T-minus 1 minute. Please take your seats. Thank you, folks. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for your patience.
So welcome, everyone. This is the Blufftown Council public hearing on the petition to disconnect by the Actons.
And it needs to be a little louder, excuse me.
You want me to use the microphone? Oh, this could be interesting. So welcome to the public hearing on the Actons petition to disconnect. What I'd like to do is just read what the notice says so that we have that as a part of the record, so bear with me. The Town of Bluff will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, August 15th at 6 p.m. at the Bluff Community Center, 190 North 3rd, East Bluff, Utah 84512, to accept written or oral comments and questions and to elicit community input on the Actons petition to disconnect 9,514 acres from the town of Bluff. The land at issue includes the Actons' 640 acres of private land located on Section 16, Township 40S, Range 22 East, SLM, Lake Mary, County of San Juan, State of Utah. Additionally, approximately 8,874 acres of state Utah school and institutional trust lands, the Federal Bureau of Land Management, and private lands, including Navajo Land Episcopal Church, located adjacent to the Acton property in the northeastern section of the Town of Bluff incorporated boundaries. So with that being said, I'm going to assume it took me 2 minutes, and it was 6:05 when I started, 6:05 p.m. I'd like to welcome the community. We had a pretty lengthy meeting last night, so I appreciate that everybody came back out. I would like to introduce Mr. Baird, who is the petitioner for the Actons. He's in the back. This is Mr. Baird's repeat performance, so thank you, Mr. Baird. He made a long trip from Salt Lake. We have representatives from the School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration. Kelly Beard is their legal counsel, and Brian Torgerson, who most of us either know the name or know, is our kind of regional rep. We have the Navajo Land Episcopal Church. This took me a while to figure out that Navajo Land was a separate entity from the Episcopal Church. And so we have the Reverend Leon Sampson, the Reverend Bisner, the Reverend Eaton, and the Reverend Chase. So as I stated, this is the public hearing. What I'm going to do is turn this over to Erin Nelson. This is our town manager. I think by now, after a year, everybody knows her. She's going to go through some preliminaries, and then we'll be turning this over to the petitioner and the School of Institutional Trust and the Navajo Land representatives to be able to make any kind of a statement they want. And of course, I'm nervous, so we're going to do roll call. All right.
Linda Sosa.
Jim Sayers, Luann Hook.
Ann Lepinen.
Erin Nelson, serving as town manager. Thank you all for your attendance tonight. We do have folks online as well, and we'll probably continue to let folks in. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. If you do intend to make a public comment this evening, I urge you to sign up now. We will close the list for public comment at 6:15. For those of you in person, there were 2 clipboards. One is to sign in that you're here this evening so we can keep it in our records. And then there's a second that clearly states that you'd like to make a public comment. For our virtual attendees, please put your name and address in the comment bar at this time. Your cutoff will also be 6:15 p.m. If during the course of this evening you feel compelled to make a public comment and you are not on that list, written comments will be accepted until 5 p.m. on Tuesday, August 29th of this year. That is 2 weeks from today. Those can be sent to office@townofbluff.org or via post at Bluff Town Council, P.O. Box 324, Bluff, Utah. All right, so if you have not signed up, please do so now. We will close that. The public comment protocol. I know a lot of you have attended public hearings before, but a few reminders as well as a new rule that we have in place for this evening. At 6:15, I will take the list, and the order of commenters will be randomized. This is to make it as fair as possible to ensure that no one already knows they're going first or goes last. So I will take that list and randomize it. I will read off, once we go through the folks who are presenting here to start, I will then read off the list so you know your position, and then I will announce the next commenter and who's up on deck. So individuals may take up to 5 minutes for their comment, and I will alert you when you have 1 minute remaining. The Bluff Town Council will not be responding to public comments except in very rare instances. Please address your comments to the Town Council, which is the presiding body this evening. If your comment has already been shared with others, you may simply state the comment that you agree with. Please use your comment period as an opportunity to treat others as you'd like to be treated. Verbal abuse will not be tolerated and may result in early termination of a comment and/or removal from the meeting. All right. Any questions? Again, I urge you to go ahead and put your name and address in the chat bar or sign up here in person. All right, I'm going to go through just kind of the high level why we're all gathered here this evening. Per Utah Code 10-2-502.5, We received a petition to disconnect, the town of Bluff, town council received a petition to disconnect earlier this year. For your information, this hearing has been posted in compliance with the Utah statute, and those dates are posted below. Clearly it worked because you're all here. Now, from the hearing this evening, as I said, the council will not be responding to comments this evening, but will have 45 days to consider what was said. Bluff Town Council must make a determination to grant or deny the disconnection, to grant or deny the disconnection petition within 45 days. The petition information, as you walked in today, also located on our town website, is a staff report. So I'm going to give you kind of a high level of what's included. It names the petitioners as Kim E. Acton and Ida E. Acton. In the request, as Ann said, we did notice they are requesting to disconnect 9,514 acres from the northeastern portion of Incorporated Bluff. While the petition does not provide a legal description of the other properties, maps were included in the appendices in the petition received, and it includes, in addition to the 640 acres that the Actons own, an additional 8,872 acres of adjacent properties. A little recap of that here. As you can see, the total acres named in the petition represent 40.1% of Bluff's current incorporated boundaries. This is the map that we received, one of the maps received. There were 4 maps in total. This shows the town boundaries as well as what is in purple, which is the petition to disconnect. And this map here shows the land ownership and acreage, so you all can see the breakdown. And I'll go ahead and read it off for the record. The Actons own 640 acres, which is 6.7% of the petition lands. Sitla owns approximately 7,370 acres, approximately 77.5% of the petition lands. The BLM has approximately 1,338 acres, which is 14.1%, and St. Christopher's Mission, the Episcopal Mission in Navajo land, has approximately 166 acres, 1.7%. Included in the report, it highlights the process of a disconnection. The town council is familiar with this. It highlights the town services that are provided to the acreage in question. It provides an analysis of the creation of an island or peninsula, analysis of state and federal lands and how they are represented in a petition, other factors that the town council can and should consider in their decision-making process, the formal recommendation that the town council must make a decision within 45 days, and then includes various appendices, including the petition letter, maps, information regarding Sitla policies, letter from the Episcopal Mission, stating opposition to the petition, and road maps, which include the town roads, including the major thoroughfare of the Bluff Bench Road. There are factors that the council can weigh, and these are listed here. Pause for a second for folks to read these. The town is to weigh all relevant factors, including the effect of disconnection on the municipality as a whole, adjoining property owners, existing or projected streets or public ways, water mains, water services, sewer mains, sewer services, law enforcement, zoning, and other municipal services. That is all I have to share now. I'm going to turn it back over to Ann.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is start with Mr. Baird. Mr. Baird, if you'd like to come up to the podium. One thing that Aaron didn't say, and I have a hard time remembering, is to, when you're making your public comment, make sure you state your name and your address so that we've got that for the record. If I don't say it now, I'm not going to remember. Welcome, Mr. Baird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, members of the staff. Can you hear me? Is it loud enough? I'm sorry, I want to make sure. Okay, let me get the gooseneck up better. Yeah, okay, thank you. Members of the council, Madam Mayor, members of the public, I'm counsel for Eric and Kim Acton, who own the property formerly owned by Judy Lyman when we were here the last time several months ago. I'm going to spend most of my time responding to the staff report, There are some factual and legal errors in there, and and I'm going to discuss them, and I'm going to discuss specifically the Mission property. I had a brief second to discuss with a few of the members of the church before the meeting started. I didn't have a chance to respond to their letter. I was just out of town and didn't have a chance. So let me just start at the start, actually. The property administration on page 2. And this may take a little while because there's a lot of information in the staff report. As I said, some of it wrong. And unfortunately, I didn't get the staff report erroneously until just a day or so ago. So I worked on this over the weekend. It was just an error, and errors happen, so I'm not terribly worried about it. So let's start with the Acton property being zoned A2 private. Actually, that's somewhat disingenuous to zone property in the middle of nowhere with no water as agriculture. I suppose there's a theoretical possibility that occasional cow may graze the property, but there's no meaningful agriculture. What usually happens in a zoning situation is property is zoned agriculture as what's called a holding zone, which means it will later come back and ask for development rights, and it's going to be considered fairly. Unfortunately, two things are true. Zoning is 100% discretionary with the city council and essentially impossible to challenge in court. So when it's zoned agricultural or open space, a little slightly different on open space, but when it's zoned agricultural, it's extremely difficult to win a court case when you try to upzone it. And even more important, the town has made it clear in its general plan, in at least 2 locations, that the town has no intention or desire to ever upzone this property for a meaningful use. On page 9 of the general plan, in point 9 in community goals, protect designated recreational and open space areas. And of course, as I pointed out, this is effectively zoned as open space from future development. And on page 31, it's even more explicit in the land use section, subsection 6 of the preservation of natural and open space, and it says to preserve agricultural land and contiguous open space, encouraging, et cetera. So obviously the town's general plan is to keep this property as open space and essentially undevelopable. There is a long discussion on page 2 about how big the town is and how much property is trying to be taken away. I would tell you, first of all, it's not my client's fault, nor is it Sitla's fault, that this town decided to incorporate a massive set of property that has no ability to control the development rights of, or that's so far away from the actual center of town as to be impractical. I did a little bit of research. Bluff is bigger in area than all but 7 municipalities in the state of Utah. It's bigger than West Valley City with 100 and X thousand people. It's bigger than Sandy City with 100 and X thousand people. It's bigger than South Jordan, ditto. West Jordan, ditto. Lehigh, not quite as big. Well, yeah, I guess it is now. Ogden as well. On the other hand, according to Wikipedia, as of the last census, Bluff is smaller in population than all but 26 cities in the state, municipalities. That makes Bluff, by far as I did my quick math, the lowest density property lowest density municipality in the entire state. That's not our client's fault, and the reason that you have so much land in here is because you made a choice to do it, and you clearly made a choice to do it, as I said before, in an effort to keep you built in a little buffer around your town, and the buffer wants out. And the law is very clear that undeveloped land, as I mentioned the last time, is sort of like a child who's 14 years old in a divorce situation and pretty much gets to determine where it wants to live and if it wants to be emancipated. And almost certainly the courts will go that way. So we're going to go through the rest of the staff report. I'm going to stay on page 2 for a second. And it also relates, I'm going to skip from page 2 where it's talking about road maintenance And it goes also on page 7, public roads. It specifically references Highway 191 and 163. And I certainly acknowledge, having driven on all of those, that those are public highways that run through Bluff. My purpose in writing the letter saying that Bluff has no roads in the disconnection property was meant that Bluff essentially owned no roads. Those are state highways. They are in fact maintained by Bluff pursuant to a provision of the city code, the state code, under the classification of the road system. But I want to point out a couple of interesting facts. I'm not sure that the public knows this. I hope that the city council does, because I'm going to be quoting from your budget. In 2022, according to your actual budget numbers, these are not estimated numbers, the town, sorry, I'm going to keep calling it mistaking between town and city. The town got approximately $55,000 under Class C road funds. Is there any guess from any member of the public how much actually was spent in 2022 on actual road maintenance of those roads by Bluff City? Well, I don't need to guess because I can look it up. It's line 4425 on your budget, road equipment supplies and maintenance. You took in $54,000 that year. You spent $220, not $220,000. You spent $220. This is your budget, as published on the website, line 4425. There's a weird line item that says roads professional and technical, and I have no idea what that is, but that's $126,000, but it's not road maintenance. Your road maintenance is listed as $220. I do not know what your 2023 actual is. It was estimated at $55,000, which is kind of odd because that happens to exactly track how much you estimated to be getting in on Class C road funds. So you estimated $54,000 you'd get from Class B road funds in 2022. You spent $220. You estimated you get $55,000, and then you estimated you're going to spend that exact same amount of money. I have no idea how much you spent, but it's clear that these are not town roads. If the property is disconnected, the state highways will remain as state highways. You just might lose a profit center of a slush fund where this money is coming from, but the roads will stay there and they will be maintained, and they will go simply from Class C roads, which are city roads, maintained with a shitty share of the gas taxes, to Class B roads, which are maintained by the county. So the roads are going to stay the same. The roads are not impacted at all. Skipping a little bit ahead on page 7, since I'm on the subject of roads, the way Class C road funds work is that the city actually gets money per mile of what they claim to be a road, whether they do anything with the road or not, whether they maintain the road in any way. And all of the roads that are listed on page 7 are essentially roads that we have no idea when they were maintained. We do know only one thing, that one of these roads was graded apparently in 2022, roughly the time of my last petition. There's no reference whatsoever in this incomplete staff report saying how much of these roads, when these roads were last maintained, or how much they were maintained or spent on. But anyway, these roads are not necessary because, and the city's expenditure on them isn't necessary, because to the extent that they exist, again, they service the property of either Sitla or my clients, and they will be maintained by the county and probably better by the county. None of you use these roads. They're just not your roads, as far as I know. It's hard to tell from the map exactly where they are, but I can't figure out from this map why anybody other than Sitla or the Actons would use these roads. So let me go on to page 2. Wildland fire protection insurance. I'm a little confused about that, and I also don't know how much was spent on it, nor how much coverage there is from the wildland fire protection. So it's a little hard for me to do that. I haven't had a chance to do any research, and the staff report does not indicate any of that information. But even if it did, the answer is still, so what? This is land, I sometimes say this land is in the middle of nowhere, but it's not really in the middle of nowhere. It's on the far edge of nowhere. with very little around it. Let me go on to the page 3. Electricity and telecommunications, yeah, okay. So what? Rocky Mountain Power and telecoms, they got a property, if it ever gets developed, we'll have to service it. The town doesn't provide any of those services. The town's only municipal regulations are apparently zoning codes, which effectively neutralize any economic value from my property, my client's property, and impede Sitla's development as well, and we'll talk about that. Going on to the taxation, it is noted that the landowner paid a total of $124 last year. It is hinted at that very little of that actually went to the town itself. It references Appendix E, but Appendix E is unfortunately not included in the staff report. So I do not know exactly, and I didn't have a chance, again, because of when I got the staff report, I didn't have a chance to verify it myself. But my guess is that probably less than $10 of property taxes went to the town from the Acton property. And of course, exactly 0 went to the town from Sitla. Again, culinary water, we don't need to seek this water service. It'd be impossible to get culinary water up to the mountain at any reason, up the bluff for any reasonable price. Going on to page 4, which are the more substantive issues, there is a just absolutely, can you bring the map up of the disconnection? Please, thank you very much. Just the main map that I submitted, if you'd be so kind. Just give me the first one, and I don't remember which is which, so we'll see. You're right, I actually think I submitted 4, but it doesn't matter. Maybe just 3. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. No, that's just fine. No, that's fine. That's fine. I forgot to bring my laser pointer. Does anybody by any chance have a laser pointer? That's okay. I don't need, can you blow it up a little bit? Can you zoom it into the upper left-hand corner? Thank you so much. And slide it over just a little bit and drop it down just a little bit. Thank you. That's perfect. That's perfect. Oh. Drop it down just a touch, if you would, Aaron, please. Just a touch. Nope, other way. Other way. Just a touch. Nope, drop it down a touch so that I can see what's above 11, 12, and 13. I can see what's on the left and the right of 11, 12, 13, if you could, so we can all see that. So yes, and slide it up. Slide it a little further to the right, please. What's that? Okay, that's fine. So, okay, so I'm trying to be helpful, please. I'm not going to interrupt you. Please don't interrupt me. Thank you. The staff report indicates incorrectly that we would be creating an illegal peninsula in 11, 12, 13, and 14. That's wrong. The statute specifically says you can't create a peninsula of unincorporated territory. This would be incorporated territory. You can create as many peninsulas of incorporated territory as you want. You can't create a peninsula of an unincorporated territory. And if this property disconnects, as you can see on the south, it would be connecting to 23 and 24. On the east, it would be bordered by this county property. On the north and the west, it would also be bordered by county property. So this disconnection in this location regarding 11, 12, 13, and 14 is not creating a peninsula. That is simply a factual and legal error in the staff report. And I hope you don't make a decision that's going to wind up in litigation based on a terrible factual mistake. Let me go to page 6 of the staff report, where it talks about the private landowners. And this is important in section 4. And if you can just stay there on that map, you will see, and again, I apologize for not having a laser pointer, you will see the Mission property at the bottom of 20 and 21, the southeast and southwest corners respectively, and the west part of 26 and the northeast part of 29. You will see those properties are proposed for disconnection. Oh, hang on, that's the wrong map, Aaron. That's the brand-new map I sent you today. No, I wanted to see oh, that's okay. That's okay. You can leave this one up. You can leave this one up. The original disconnection petition took out the Mission property. And the reason it took out the Mission property is because state law is interesting about creating a peninsula or an island. And we included the Mission property in the disconnection to avoid creating a peninsula. But let me be clear, the statute allows the city council to create an island or a peninsula. And any statement to the contrary in the memorandum is incorrect. If you look at 10.2-502.5, where it talks about the council granting the disconnection petition, there is absolutely no reference whatsoever to a prohibition against creating a peninsula. You can create peninsulas if you want to on a voluntary disconnection. And now let me be even more clear. We would be happy to have the Mission stay in the town. We don't care if the Mission leaves. In fact, if the Mission wants to stay in the town, we want them to stay in the town. And the town can do that. The town simply can say, we're going to grant the petition minus the Mission property. And you have the authority to do that. And we want you to do that. Absolutely clear. Now let me talk about the logic behind the peninsula. The statute says peninsula. The Supreme Court in the Bluffdale case made it clear that the peninsula is a terribly defined term. However, I'm not going to argue about whether it fits the definition here, because it may. The difficulty is the Supreme Court said the reason for the creation of the peninsula rule in the disconnection was so there would be no difficulties in servicing the peninsula that's left in. And that's what the court said in Bluffdale. In this case, of course, there is no difficulty in the town providing services to the Mission because there's a highway that runs right by the Mission. And we're perfectly happy to have the Mission use that highway for the town to provide whatever limited services the town provides to the Mission. If the Mission wants it, they can have it. We have no intention of forcing the Mission in. And what you're seeing here is a map that we would suggest the town should adopt that leaves the Mission in the town's boundaries. So we'd be happy to have that happen. So I'll move on to that. The rest of the factors that are listed on page 6 of the memorandum from your staff, those are actually not specifically factors for the town council to consider at all. Those are specifically listed as factors for a court to consider when involving a challenge to a refusal of the town to let the property out. You can consider them all you want. That's fine. I'm not suggesting that they're inappropriate factors for you to consider in any way. They're just not mandatory factors for you to consider. The first vote is simply, do you want to fight to keep this property in, or are you okay with letting this property out? That's a political decision. You can make that political decision. It's reviewable under the standards of 502.7. But under 502.5, it's purely a political decision. You get to vote. And essentially your vote is, do you want to spend a lot of money to fight to keep property in for the sole reason of denying its developability rights? Or do you want to let, and therefore, what's the line? Suffer the slings and arrows, et cetera, because you'd wind up in expensive litigation. And back to your budget, you're showing $25,000 for attorney's fees. I would suggest you need a budget opening to increase that number substantially based on my prior experiences. But we don't want you to spend that money. There's no earthly reason to keep this property in unless these people will say that they want it to keep it in just so that they can keep it open space, which is clearly why they want to keep it in. They want to keep it in so it's undeveloped property. And that's not what the statute says, and that's not what the case law says. Let me go on to page 7. And I'm going through these factors mostly to make a record of the in case we have to appeal this in case we have to go to district court to challenge your decision, assuming that you decide to spend money rather than let my clients out. So I'm building a record for that. And I understand there's going to be a lot of people yelling and unhappy with me. That's what I get paid for. And I know people are going to quote lines from grammar requests, and they're going to besmirch my name, et cetera. I don't care. That's just the way it goes. The facts are, they're not going to, unless they're candid and tell you they want to keep the property in to keep it as open space and undeveloped, the other thing they're just going to do is yell at me. That's okay. So let's go on to the factors on page 7. The staff report references the aquifer, and some disconnection of the lands could hinder the ability to regulate activities. That's utterly incorrect. The town has no actual authority to regulate anything regarding the aquifer. Many towns use the aquifer and water systems as an excuse to do a discretionary reason, to deny a rezoning. But you have no authority to protect the aquifer. The aquifer is protected by EPA regulations and the Division of Drinking Water and other state agencies. You may think you have authority to protect the aquifer, but you really don't. It's protected otherwise. Going on to the page 8 of the staff report. There is one thing that I'm going to agree with on the staff report, and that is the quote on paragraph 10, municipal services are limited. That's a polite way of saying almost essentially non-existent. If you look through the budget, I looked through the budget, the upcoming budget, fully 1/6 of your budget next year is spent on your city manager. 1/6. Another 1/8 is spent on legal fees. Very little, I mean, just this is your budget. I suggest you look at it online. When you add the FICA, the Medicare, and the salary, that's 1/6 of your budget. Tiny little bit, as I said, for road maintenance. Very little for anything else. Some of these columns I can't figure out. There's an audiovisual tech for $3,000. But the actual services provided by the town, if you just judge it by the budget, are essentially non-existent. Going on, it's unknown on page 8, it's unknown if Acton property or Sittler Devens will develop. That's true, we don't know, but why is the town speculating about it? And it makes a statement, any future development should be part of the town. No, that's the whole question. That statement subsumes the answer. It assumes, without any justification, that this property X miles away from the town center should be developed in the town. No, Sittler controls most of this property, and Sittler has absolutely, and they'll tell you, has absolutely no obligation to listen to anything you say. They do often, and they try to be cooperative, but they don't have to. So there's no reason to assume that that self-congratulatory statement is anything other than a surmise. It's not difficult to evaluate the financial impacts of disconnection because there are none. You lose $10 from this property disconnecting. $10, that's my estimate. $10 in a budget of $449,000 is nothing. The financial impact on this town of this disconnection is absolutely nothing. And considering there are no meaningful services provided to any of this property, it is literally impossible for this property, if it disconnects, to increase the service costs to either San Juan County or to the town of Bluff because there are no service costs. There's no service. Finally, maybe finally, yeah, I'm close to finally. The paragraph 11 of the staff report talks about could impact the future. We're a future tax base. We are not here to speculate about the future. The court will not speculate about the future. And as I indicated, as it relates to the Acton property, the way you have it zoned, there is no future tax base here because at most it's ag and at most it's probably $10 a year. So there are no, there's no ability to have any impact on the taxes. I'm going to just sum it up. My clients have been longtime owners of this property. I think they're on the fourth or fifth generation of this land. And, sorry, was I stepping too far away from the mic?
Just for your summary, I'd like to get it clear.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I apologize. I noticed your hand, so I'll move close. I'll move closer to the mic. For my clients have owned this property and their family for generations. It constitutes approximately 20% of the private property in the town that's now in the town of Bluff. But my clients don't live on that property, so they can't vote. They don't have a say in what their property is. What you have here is a town of 240 people trying to control the future of undeveloped property that totals approximately 37 square miles. Law is a bet on what a judge is ultimately going to do, and when you present it to a judge that 240 people are trying to control 37 square miles of property, and they're trying to keep it from being developed according to their own general plan and according to everybody you see that's going to be yelling about trying to stop development. And according to even the own staff report, when you get to that point, I'm confident that after $50,000 or $100,000 worth of legal fees, the court is going to say, as the court does historically when dealing with vacant lands, they get to pick where they live. We don't want to spend your money on that. We'd rather have you spend the $50,000 or whatever it is instead of on your lawyer. We'd rather have it go to actually providing services for the town. We would ask you to consider that, and we would ask you to do one of two things. If you don't think that you have the authority, I think you'd be wrong, to let the mission stay in the town, then please let the entire property disconnect, and we can figure out a way to have the mission simply re-annex in. The mission could annex back in the next day. There is no prohibition on the statute for the mission to get kicked out of the town and annex right back in the next day. And we would not oppose it. We would be happy and we would support it. So the mission, we want to hold them harmless on this. So either adopt the modified petition with letting the mission stay in the town, or adopt the petition taking the mission out and then let them re-annex back in. I appreciate the time. I will respond on a rebuttal. I'll try to be brief, and I'll try to respond only to if there are substantive arguments rather than ad hominem. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Torgerson. Yes, go ahead.
I think most of you know me, but for the record, my name is Brian Torgerson. I'm the area manager for this area for SITLA. I'd like to thank the council and the community of Bluff and the mayor for hosting this. SITLA is here quite a bit on and off because we do have a mandate to develop our lands, and sometimes it's not always popular, but we always try to come at least meet with the community and let you guys know what we're doing and what our intents are. And hopefully that's always been the case, even though not everything's always been popular to what you guys may want. I'd like to kind of go back a little bit to a little bit of the history of where we're coming from. Mr. Baird is a petitioner and the counsel for the petitioner, and with me I have our legal counsel, Kelly Beard, and she'll be making a little talk a little bit later as well. But first of all, the things that we want to bring to the council to consider is, first of all, the town of Bluff has made it very clear that they don't want to see the Bluff Bench developed. And that's kind of very evident in a lot of the communications that's been going back and forth over the ages. The first one I want to bring to your attention is it was right after the Bluff City was recently incorporated. There was an application that we received for a solar project. At that time, it was just an application. We notified the county, because that's standard protocol, that we received an application, and then you guys let us know that you guys would like to be briefed on it. So we came down and met with the town and let you guys know that we received that. It was very clear at that time that the city did not want to see that area developed, and especially not for a solar project. And since that, or right after that, the town was in the process of developing some new ordinances. There was a new city, there was a new incorporation, so they were starting to get their new ordinances together. And at that point in time, we got a map and how they wanted to plan and zone the Sitla lands. And it was very clear that they wanted to zone us as open space. And we sent a letter, it was dated April of 2019, that pretty much said, please don't rush this. It's a lot better, I'm just gonna paraphrase, the letter was quite long. It's a lot better if communities work with us, because if they don't, then it becomes an immediate fight. There's always a fight there that proceeds if they're not willing to work with us. And we would prefer to work with communities as much as possible. However, we got a response shortly after that letter that essentially the community didn't want to work with us or communicate with us anymore, and they were going to proceed with the zoning as is. And that was really disappointing because we thought that was a great chance for us to engage and work with the city of Bluff. And since that, there's also been, I want to talk a little bit about the land exchange with the Bears Ears. I think there's some evidence in that the Bears Ears was, there was some lobbying to create the size of the Bears Ears to incorporate the Bluff Bench. And then at that meeting, I kind of let the community know, but just because that's what the president proclamated does not mean that we have to automatically give up our lands that are involved in that. And so we kind of let you guys know that we're still planning on keeping the Bluff Bench or a lot of it. And therefore, but that's just another indication that you guys don't want to see the Bluff Bench developed. And we understand that. But at the same time, we have a mission mandate to develop these lands, especially when we have a bona fide project like the solar project that has been before us and before you. And the biggest thing that I'd like to bring to your attention before I turn the time over to our legal counsel, Kelly, is that we don't really see a great path forward in the town of Bluff. Right now, the town zone, the property is open space, and there's no conditional use process for a developer to follow. Whereas in San Juan County, if we were to go into San Juan County, the land would likely be zoned agricultural, which allows solar as a conditional use. And there is a conditional use process within San Juan County, which there is not a conditional use process within the town of Bluff. And so for those reasons, we have joined the petitioner to disconnect from the city of Bluff. And I would like to echo one of the things that Bruce said, that we think that this would, I think it would just be a lot, we would like to save everyone's money and not have a long drawn-out legal process. And we hope that you guys will consider our petition with the petitioner to disconnect from the city of Bluff. And I'll turn some time over to Kelly to fill in any gaps that I'm sure I have.
Thank you, Mr. Torgerson.
My name is Kelly Beard, and I'm counsel for Trust Lands. And this is not I'm not a litigator, so this is not my comfort zone to be up in front of people. So please excuse me if I have a little bit of nerves. But just to follow up with what Brian said, so our developer, the solar developer, they need some certainty on how they're going to get their project through. So right now they're applying to Rocky Mountain Power. They're going to, try to get this project going, and they need a conditional use permit or something equivalent to it. So they've come to us and said, what are we going to do, right? So we've come to you, and we had discussions about this, and you said, well, come for a zoning change, right? Well, we asked to not be included in that A1 zone, to work with the city. At the time the zoning ordinance was adopted, we asked, please don't do this, work with us. Let's try to figure this out. And then you said no. Right, so I think Sitla has very low confidence that coming to you for a zoning change would be an effective strategy to help this project move forward. So that's the first thing. So the other option would be to follow our statutory process. So under the statute, we don't have to get a conditional use permit, right? We can just give you a plan of development, and then you tell us how much it's going to cost for services, and we have to build that into the budget. right? Well, there aren't going to be any services. There's not going to be any water connection or sewer or anything else like that. So there's going to be very little engagement on that. And that's our other alternative. And that's what we plan to do if we can't disconnect, right? But we don't want to do that. So in Kane County, you know, I mean, I should say in your general plan, you have said you don't have jurisdiction on our land, right? But you have given us no process to follow to come to you with any projects. Kane County also said, hey, we don't have jurisdiction on your land. Here's an ordinance. This is what you do to come and seek our consent or get our input. And we do follow that process. And we have a really robust process with Kane County. And to some extent, I encourage you to look at that, maybe adopt something like that. Regardless of this disconnection petition, we have land within the city of Bluff that will, you know, we will be coming to you with requests in the future. So we will be working together regardless of the disconnection. But in this particular case, there's nothing really for us to do other than to kind of follow this funky statutory provision. We would prefer to just move to San Juan County. They have a conditional use process. We know exactly what that process looks like. There's some certainty there. We can go through that process and it's comfortable for everybody. So that's something that we want to do for our developer. It's something we want to do for any future developer on that land. In response to just a couple of comments in here, I mean, I know the town is quite worried about the land if we sell it, because we do sell land sometimes. And so Bruce sent a map earlier of the Bears Ears Monument Exchange map. And I thought maybe it would be useful to pull that up, if you would. No, it has it's very colorful. It has a lot of pink in it. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that pink and blue block there, that's the entire Bluff Bench block under Sitla's, how we've designated it. The pink shows everything that we are proposing to exchange with the federal government. So, I mean, I want to say we have listened to you. You don't want development. You want us out. There's more than 50% of that block we're proposing to exchange, right? We have kept a core part of it where we have a substation, we've got a gravel pit, and we have the solar lease. So it's only the blue parts that we intend to retain if the Bears Ears exchange goes through, which is still in Congress. So there's that. The other thing is, and then that land would be federal land, and the federal government they're not in the habit of selling a lot of their land. The other thing about it is, and we can't say we'll never sell this land, but we aren't in the habit, and we don't generally sell from blocks. We keep those for other uses. So, I mean, not to say that this is we're not confirming, yes, we're never going to sell this land, but we don't have any real intent to sell this land. And we do consider it a block, and we keep those blocks for development. But I did want to show you guys how much of that land is going to be exchanged out of trust lands management. The other thing, the petition makes a comment that we are not a proper petitioner, but I do want to say we are a proper petitioner. We could have brought this petition on our own. We just would have needed to include a private property owner in there, because the statute in 2018 was amended, and it was amended to add in this word private to the property. And so you only had to have 50% of the property owners, and now you have to have 50% of the private property owners. And I listened to the legislative hearings on that to try to figure out what they were doing. And it was because people would bring disconnection petitions. A lot of it was federal land, And of course, the federal government isn't going to join in on any of that stuff. So it was really to prevent the federal government from keeping people from disconnecting. So I don't think there was ever an intent in that to keep SITLA from seeking a disconnection. So we are a proper party. And I do think at this point, it's important enough for us to get out that we would continue with this in litigation. But yeah. So I think those are the points I wanted to make. Are there any questions that you have? Well, actually, maybe I'll turn that back over to Brian, but yeah. Okay.
Mr. Torgerson, do you want to take questions now, or would you prefer to wait until the end?
I'd prefer to wait and hear the public and have a chance to rebuttal and answer questions at that point.
Perfect, that's what we were anticipating. All right, then, I don't believe there's anyone here from the Bureau of Land Management. Then I would ask if the Navajo land representatives, do they have anything that they would like to state or any opening comment? Mr. Sampson.
Yes, Yate, members of the board, members of the committee here, those are online. Yate, my name is Reverend Leon Sampson. I'm part of the House clan, Red House clan, born of the Red Cheek, and my maternal parents are Bitterwater. And I think it's important for me to introduce myself that way, so that way you can see who you represent. And today I'd like to do a format that I'm comfortable with. You know, I'm a preacher, I like to preach, and so I like to preach my sermons in 3 ways that you can remember these topics. Okay, first I will be telling you about a little bit about the history of St. Christopher's Mission and why that's important to have that relationship with the town of Bluff and with the community that we serve around the town of Bluff and the mission. Secondly, I'd like to tell you what we've been doing now to strengthen that relationship in the ministries and the services that we provide with the property and with the community that we serve. Thirdly, I'd like to finally talk a little bit about the future, where we're going, what we plan to do with the mission, what we'd like to see happen around this property that we have at the mission. So, over 80 years ago, the St. Christopher's Mission was founded by Father Baxter Liebler, an Episcopal priest who understood mission as a process of discerning with the people and the Spirit of God that is active and present to the land and the people around the land, before even some of the churches ever arrived. With that being said, Father Baxter Liebler would travel across the reservation and he would see and be part of the community of the Navajo people. He would ride out in his little Jeep, or sometimes he would take his donkey and do worship out there. He would do services out there. He would do pastoral ministry, and he would collect people's ideas and thoughts. And this location at the mission has been provided by the state of Utah as a service outport for the community. As long as we can be a service outport for the community, we exist as a church and a property around there. So some of the things that we've done so far is that even the state of Utah has granted us some funds to do some work around restoring some of the service outport clinics. We provided medical needs for the community that would not have a service within the 50-mile radius. We would have employment vocational training for some of the local people here to gain some vocational knowledge and start to career and build a mission. We would have some food education training, which I became a culinary chef because my mom was a person who was brought up in that mission as a cook. We would do garden education, field education, and they would do preservation of some of the foods there, providing some for the community They had a pre-Head Start building for some of the parents that would educate their own kids and their community kids to help jumpstart them into the next education process. And all these were created just for the community, just like the Sustainable Water Ministry. Oh yeah, he also facilitated services at the mission for the community. So what have we done so far? Well, the Episcopal Church in Navajo Land just celebrated their 80th year anniversary and convocation gathering. In that gathering, we had members of the Episcopus to come out to this community and stay in the lodging in Bluff, experience the culture, experience the community of Bluff, experience the culture of the mission. And in that way, they were able to be hosted and realize what the Southwest is like within the church. Many of your children and the children across the reservation here have attended some of the Back to the Kitchen Table Camp programs, a food culinary program, which is also part of the Vacation Bible School that is offered every summer for the community. This enriches the kids to be able to understand community life together with each other. Our own Episcopus Church had a food program. Over $300,000 was spent in this food ministry donated to the churches so that we can feed the community with food boxes during COVID when families were isolated at home or had COVID. And that product was brought here from the Bluff community businesses. And over 72,000 people were fed from that program over a span of 3 years in that program. The Homerdale Farm has always been a farm for communities and families to be able to come out and do some community gardening. Some of you have come out to the Homerdale Farm and plotted. This program was developed for economic development for families, sustaining their own families, but it was also a program for state programs to do some rehabilitation programs. So they would bring their patients out, their clients, and they would garden as a rehabilitation program. And last but not least, the Artesian Well Ministry. This Artesian Well Ministry is also an 80-year ministry. And in its celebration and service, it served over 18,000 families per year. You're talking about 50 families that come out every day, at least, to gather water. They would gather water in the 1-gallon containers or the 1,500-gallon containers. And they were used, and I heard this is Bluff water is for my coffee. That's how good it tastes. And so many travelers would come out in a radius of 70 miles just to get this water. I travel out from Fort Defiance, Arizona, just to get this water every time I come through here. Many people use that for their consumption. Maybe many people use it for their gardening. Many people use that for their livestock. People from the Navajo Reservation travel off the reservation just to come here to get that water. People from Bluff get that water. Even White Mesa has come to get that water. And the reason why is their water is not potable. They cannot drink that water. So a lot of the community members come down here. And the land that surrounds that water is very precious. And the canyon that sits inside St. Christopher's Mission is deemed one of the purest aquifer of San Juan County because it is not overrun by cattle. Yes, cattle is above the mission, and they take over the water and they contaminate it. Science says it. What are we doing today? What are our plans going forward? Well, in our 80th year celebration, we just recommended the Water Well Ministry. And we will support that ministry as long as we can keep it going. But that depends on the land around it and the development that happens around it. We've had petitions in the past where we've had people that wanted to drill and test. We've tried to keep that from happening. Some of the local residents have also seen some of the tiny houses that were being built. And these tiny houses could create the potential of residential housing. But we are still in development of what that looks like. But we have to continue in working together with this community and making that work. The state of Utah has even petitioned a matching grant to us to redevelop and refurbish the old clinic, the historical clinic, as the new Hojo Resource Center. And this resource center would offer programs across the reservation in this county, in San Juan County, and all the people around us for Alcoholics Anonymous, for Wellness to Red Road program, the Episcopal Church Women Gathering, even the Youth Mentorship Development Program, or the after-school mentorship program, some would call it. So this would be an endless potential service for this community, but it depends on the preservation of this community around the mission, not just this little island and the road that comes in. It depends on the resources and the stewardship of how we take care and maintain what's underneath there and what's around it. So I'm very passionate. I'm sorry to say I will probably get some lashback from other people, but I'm very passionate about how we take care of this space. Stewardship in developing this is very valuable to me. And an aquifer, as long as we can keep it for the people and the thousands of people that use it and depend on it every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. So I'm going to turn this back to our town manager, and she's going to make a change here. So, Erin?
Alrighty, so we're gonna have a minor change. We had one person online sign up to make a public comment. So if everyone in the room is okay, I'm gonna have that individual go first, and then we'll get to all the folks in the room. So Dan Myers, are you online?
I'm popping up right now.
Thanks, Dan. You have
Sorry.
5 minutes.
Thanks. I was trying to make sure my 1-year-old and 3-year-old were safe in there with Jocelyn before I came out.
Give me just a second, Dan. I'm gonna put you up on the screen, and then
Oh, boy.
then you're gonna be good to go. Sorry, just these couple last minute changes. I'll let you know when you can see all the beautiful people in the room, or
Perfect.
they can see you.
The less beautiful person on the camera.
Give us just a second.
Sure.
Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Just let you enjoy the view.
And Craig, can you focus in on Dan so we can make sure we can see him?
I'll come back.
All right, Dan, you are on screen. You've got 5 minutes.
Thanks, Aaron. So my name's Dan Myers. I live here with my wife Jocelyn and our 2 kids, going on 3 and 1, who are very active. And we're nearing bath time, so that's why I'm not with you today. But I'm at my house that overlooks Calf Canyon, which we feel very fortunate to live here. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I help to support the arts in our incredible town. We kind of stumbled around this along this town about 6 years ago when we found it, and quickly fell in love for the natural beauty, for the culture, the people. I mean, it literally feels like a whole different country here. We feel very lucky to live here. The lands that disconnect are our backyard. And so we're definitely concerned with the management of them. I mean, we look at the camera right here. This is Calf Canyon. I don't know if everyone who's visiting has had a chance to come see this, but if you get a chance to walk around it, it's definitely worth it. We appreciate the support that SITLA provides for our schools and our kids who, our kids will be attending schools there very soon. And so we understand the mission, and, we appreciate every dollar that we can get, because I know that's, it's a struggle down here a bit. But we're also concerned about the health of our kids and the health of everyone in our town. And the biggest concern we have is that we want to say on what happens on this land. It's not that we want all open space or whatever the quotes have been. We just want to make sure we can protect things. And I feel almost embarrassed going after, the father who just went. That was just incredibly eloquent. But his statements on the aquifers and that, just beyond powerful. And so another concern we have is the operations that go on this canyon behind us. I don't think they're working right now. No, I don't hear them. But there's a gravel pit up behind us. And Sitla's statement online is that environmental compliance is a top priority at Trust Lands. But an article from the Canyon Echo in 2020 or 2022 maybe, they're asking if there was a plan of operations in place for this gravel pit. And I believe Ms. Beard commented, there's not one. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. And this one we didn't. And so that's why we like to have a say in what's going on with our public land. The gravel pit above our house, it's a view shed issue. From town now, we see tractors working up there. It's changing the landscape as all the rocks are taken down. And it's a noise issue. We hear it during the summer. But the real concern's during winter when the winds move from the north, because that blows right down our canyon into our house. And we have dust that covers our house and our cars. And if anyone knows, gravel dust is pretty dangerous. The fine dust can cause irritants that irritates the lungs and potentially can cause cancer. And so this is much more of a question of whether we want to have luxurious open space or if we want to have health for our kids and if we're worried about our kids. And so that's our biggest concern about allowing all this land to disconnect and us not having a say. And I know everyone said that we don't have a say anyway, that we can basically be bullied into what they want. But just appealing to your other senses a bit, that you follow that mission about environmental compliance so that we don't have to worry about the health of our kids and running inside in winter when the dust overtakes us again. So I urge the town to disconnect, or sorry, to deny the disconnect. Thank you.
And alrighty, so moving to the folks in the room, we had 13 people sign up. I'm going to go through the list so you know about when you're going to be up. First up will be Tamara DeRosiers, Nathan Sosa, Kirsten Ewing, Cornelia Eaton, Jackie Warren, Josh Ewing, John Chase, Bill Crowder, Bill Lincoln, Leon Sampson, Barry Beisner, Jacob Nelson, and Marcia Haydenfeld. Tamara, would you please make your way to this podium? Thank you.
Okay. Tamara DeRosier, 1328 South Oak Street, Cortez, Colorado. I also own 2 acres and a home here in Bluff. So in the tradition of the late, great Mr. Rogers, I'm here to talk about being good neighbors. It's something that we learn in church, love thy neighbor. It's something that we teach our children, do unto others. It's unfortunate, but many people in Bluff, and pretty much universally, feud with their neighbors. I am sure that Sitla has long experience, as do I, of having properties subject to the tender mercies and the screaming activists therein. So I guess probably most of us all know where that quote came from. Mr. Baird wrote that in an email to Sitla. He's the attorney, as we all know now, for the Actons. who said quite often tonight in his opening statement, it doesn't matter and I don't care. The Actons and Mr. Baird and SITLA, the state land agency, are all colluding to disconnect 9,500 acres from the Bluff city limits. Mr. Baird, that is not how a good neighbor talks. And SITLA, good neighbors don't petition to disconnect. Those screaming activists that Baird referred to are us. We are your neighbors, SITLA. In fact, my property and my house is smack dab right next to the west parcel of BLM land SITLA wants to trade into as part of the Bears Ears land swap. How exactly SITLA thinks they can make money for the school children of Utah off land that is an inaccessible floodplain? Does anyone else find it odd that SITLA wants to trade into Bluff? 3 different parcels of BLM land, while simultaneously joining a petition to disconnect almost 10,000 acres from Bluff. So you want in, but you want out. Good neighbors work together to financially support their community, our world-class viewscapes, our watershed, roads, water system, planning and zoning, a healthy economy, quality of life. We all know what SITLA does on their lands, okay? It's their mandate. They have to make money for the schools. So what we see around here is we see gravel pits. You know, we get it. But what happens when that SITLA land gets sold at auction? And those new buyers are disconnected now. They're not within the town limits anymore. You know, Moab probably started out as 250 people too. Now look at it. Okay, that's a big reason why the people of Bluff are concerned about controlling their outskirts, because they've seen what happened in Moab. SITLA isn't a democracy. It's not public land. That land is not public. Okay. SITLA has other rooms where they make its decisions, and most of the neighbors are not invited. There may be no way to revise the Bears Ears land swap or to stop this disconnect, but if there is, I pray those screaming activists therein will find it. Thank you.
Nathan Sosa, you're up, and then Kirsten Ewing, you're up next.
My name is Nathan Sosa. I'll give you my work address, 55 North, 500 East, Bluff, Utah, 84512. I guess in terms of the disconnect, I'm a member of the mission, and at no point did anyone contact the mission and say, hey, we want to disconnect your land. No one came by, no one called, no one wrote a letter. And in terms of the water at the mission, if that water is felled, then thousands of people will not have access to water. You can go to the reservation. There's no potable water there. There's no development of water, very little. And so people have to travel to get water. The mission is one of the places that people get water. And it's not a given that SITLA will not sell that land. I mean, you know, with fracking, if they can make money at fracking, then, you know, that quote unquote benefits our schools. But I sit on our school community council here in Bluff. My daughter goes to school. There are about approximately 74 other kids that go to school here. Our school receives $14,000 in SITLA money. We have no art teacher. We have no music teacher. We have no librarian. We have no after-school program. So, I mean, I don't know what percentage of money SITLA uses for administrative costs versus money going towards schools, but our schools don't really see any of that money down here. My guess is it would benefit us marginally in terms of the development up there. There are 7 schools closing potentially in Salt Lake City. I don't think SITLA is going to be able to save those schools. In terms of the development up there, I mean, if the Actons want to disconnect their land, why don't we just have them disconnect that land? I don't look at SITLA as being a benefit to communities. I look at SITLA as being a benefit to developers and development. If you want to develop, look for SITLA land around you. I think it should be unconstitutional, personally. We need to write SITLA out of the Constitution. Last year, there was a law passed that said $8,000 of student per pupil funding from public schools, that $8,000 has to go to private school students. And so we're losing money. Our public schools are losing money. SITLA's not going to make up for that money. I believe that the town should not grant this petition. I would rather it go to court. Who cares? Lawyers will make money, but our kids won't. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Kirsten, thank you. And Cornelia Eaton, you will be after Kirsten.
Thank you. My name's Kirsten Ewing. I live at 405 East Black Locust here in Bluff. And despite what my shirt says, I promise my voice will stay at this decibel the entire time. I actually tend to have a very faint voice, so I'll have to work to project it. That being said, I think motivation is a really powerful word, and fear is a really powerful motivator. What has not become clear to me in the months that we've been listening to Mr. Baird and now to SITLA is, what is the motivation? We don't know what the intention is with this land, and I understand in theory that we don't have the right to know. It's not our business, but that is why we drew this boundary. And I feel very, very strongly that the water that runs under the lands that you are slating to disconnect, maybe right now don't seem as valuable to you, but in years moving forward will be very valuable. Water in the desert is huge. I mean, I think this year was the first year that water was traded on the stock market. I also really, really strongly feel that what Tamara stated in terms of just wanting to know what the motivation is, because, you know, the lawyers are making a lot of money on this, but at the same time, they're not, I mean, how much do they pay in taxes a year on these lands? $10, something like that. So it just doesn't compute with me. And so with that, I urge that we do not grant the disconnect. Thank you.
Cornelia Eaton, and then Jackie Warren, you're on deck.
Hello, I'm Reverend Canon Cornelia Eaton. I represent the Episcopal Church in Navajo Land. I serve as the bishop's canon, and I also serve here in the Bluff area at St. Christopher's Mission. I'm actually from a community called Upper Fruitland, New Mexico. I'm from the Farmington area. So I'm here to be present and represent and to support the community here. I feel that so far, after everything that I have heard, there's a really lot of trust building that needs to happen. I think clarity and also have communication with the community here. And I hope that every voice here that is heard, that they will be recognized and honored and also respected. With the community at St. Christopher's Mission, there is a lot of opportunity there. It's about, the community there and also the community in Bluff it's about relationships. How can we continue to be a part of relationship with each other and, building community together? I'm hearing that not to disconnect. This is what matters to a community, to listen to a community about what matters to them. And I hope that this conversation, as it continues, that the voices here will be heard. Thank you very much.
Jackie, Josh Ewing, you'll be after Jackie.
Can you hear me? My name is Jackie Warren. I've lived in Bluff for 27 years. I live 100 West Main Street. Mr. Torgerson, you and I had a conversation about 22 years ago, and I'm sure you don't remember me. At the time, it was regarding Sitla land and what Sitla was going to do. It was over at the coffee shop. There was a young woman there who had some statistics which really opened my eyes to Sitla, and that after that conversation, I spoke with a dear person who lived here since the 50s, who showed me a map of the squares of Sitla land around the state and how there should be one square in every section. But Sitla trades their land out. If they want something, they just trade it to someone else, and they even trade it to private people. But the statistic this one woman quoted, and it may have changed in 22 years, is that the money you make off that square of land, 82% goes to administrative costs, and less than 18% actually reaches any school district. Thank you.
John Chase, you'll be after Josh Ewing.
Josh Ewing, 405 Black Locust. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I really appreciate you being here and your courtesy and your respectfulness. I know it's hard on evenings like this. I do have to admit I'm kind of disappointed that town council didn't ask any clarifying questions of the petitioners before we get a chance to hear. There were so numerous factual inaccuracies and disparagements of our town that I could speak for 20 minutes and not even come close to starting to address them. And it really does frustrate me that at a public hearing, Mr. Baird is being accorded more time than the entire residency of Bluff. So I think that's disappointing to me. So instead of trying to dispute some of those factual inaccuracies that I've heard, I will take the time to make an extensive public comment to that period in writing afterwards. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I had prepared to say. And what I'm prepared to say is that Bluff is an incredibly solution-oriented town. We do like to work with our neighbors, as Tamara said, and we have shown that over and over again. And unfortunately, the petitioners in this case that were here to speak, and I'm also very disappointed that no one from BLM was willing to come here tonight and speak for why they would be part of this effort. But the petitioners that have come, I want to reiterate, they did not come to our town to work with us in any sort of good faith effort. They're using this effort, that our zoning effort that were put on by my dear friends volunteering their time in the early days of our town, is the one reason that they threw up their hands and they couldn't make the good effort to come down and say, hey, we have this idea for a solar farm. How can we work together to make a solar farm work? Doesn't look like your zoning's quite right for that right now, but how could we work that out? That was not the conversation. In fact, I personally reached out to the solar developer to talk to them and met with the mayor up on the bench and said, hey, we would love to support solar. We would love to be the greatest fan for a solar development. We have concerns about this location. due to flooding and due to the reality that it's being used as an excuse to hold open drilling in our watershed. And it's an excuse not to trade these lands out of Bears Ears. So it was not as was purported to be said here that like, oh, we have wanted to work with you, we've wanted to work so many times, and we are just not willing to do so. Let me just say, there was never a zoning request by the petitioners to bring forward any positive ideas of what to do here. There was never any sort of effort by Sitla to come to the town and say, hey, you know, there's an oil developer that wants to drill in your watershed. You might want to know about it, and you know, do you have any concerns? That never happened, and when the lease was issued on our bluff bench right above our watershed. There was never a notification of the town or any sort of effort when there was a massive expansion of gravel mining on our viewshed. We're talking massive thousands of tons of gravel being removed that there was never any mention. When we asked for the lease with the developer to be asked for, that they come to us for a conditional use permit, that they have a plan of operations and a reclamation plan, we were summarily dismissed. When the land trade was being proposed, and all these communities across the state of Utah, no one came to ask to Bluff, hey, what do you think about this land trade? What should we do here? Particularly when, as Tamara well points out, that there are lands wanting to be acquired in our town. You're trying to leave our town because we're so hard to work with and then trying to come into our town. What is the reason for this, right? We have to ask, what is the motivation? What do they want to do that they won't want to work with us on? Because if it was something good, you think they would be like, no, we're going to hide something really good from you guys. It's going to increase property taxes for your town or something like that. No. It's much more likely that it's something like they want to pull fracking water out of the San Juan River, that they don't have any access to the river to get to the water. Or they want to do another oil dump, like the oil dump that they already have just outside of our town boundaries. There's something that they want to do. We are incredibly solution-oriented. Let me just give you a couple of examples. When UDOT said they wanted to develop gravel in our backyard, what did we do? We paid for a geologist to go out and find an alternative, which is now in use and producing valuable gravel. When the Guyman property wanted to develop, what did we say? We said we will help raise the money, and we raised $2.1 million to buy that from the Guyman families. When the Bluff River Trail, we went to the BLM and said, we want to work with you. We spent 20 years working with BLM to make the Bluff River Trail happen. When Bluff Dwelling says we want to develop on Sitla property, we said, sure, let's work on that. We'll work with a business owner in Bluff. So I don't want to go over my 5 minutes here, but we are very solution-oriented in this town when people are willing to work with us and are willing to approach us. And when they don't and they declare war on us, I say we say no.
John Chase. Bill Crowder, you will follow him.
Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, whatever. My name is Reverend John Chase. I'm a priest in the Episcopal Church in Navajo Land, currently serving in the area of northern New Mexico with the bishop and Canon Cornelia, who you've already heard from her. I have been appointed to come back to St. Christopher's for the third time. My first experience here in this community was in 2016 when I had a sabbatical from my church in Texas, and I came out here and worked at the St. Christopher's Mission as a transitional officer. I came back, after I retired, I came back in the beginning of 2020, and right after I arrived, of course, everything shut down, and we got into the new mode of developing food resourcing for people, and we work very closely with organizations here in this community and in Montezuma Creek and Aneth. To be able to present food to people in need, as my colleague, a long-term, born here resident, Leon has just said. And I will be coming back in September to take over from Joe Hubbard, who had left to go to South Dakota. And I'll be working for the next year or so, working as an interim once again to prepare for whoever the next priest is that they will call to come to this area. And I just want to say that I have enjoyed working with the people, particularly during the crisis of Bluff, of the COVID, and with the people of Bluff. There was a cooperative effort that was done among this community. The community came together, and we want to continue that. But I'd also like to just reinforce what Canon Cornelius said, that we really need to have transparency on all sides, and we need to work together for solutions. And I think we've heard this from citizens of Bluff here who have said they want to work. They want to work together with other organizations. In my experience with the city of Bluff, particularly during the COVID time, was there were a lot of people in Bluff who were willing to work with us. There were people in Bluff who helped us develop those gardens, redevelop the gardens that we have going there now. And we want to continue that. And I don't think there's anything to be served by this dissociation. Thank you.
Bill Crowder, to be followed by Bill Lincoln.
Good evening. My name is Bill Crowder, and I live at 685 West Cottonwood, that end of town. I've got 2 points I'd like to make. The first is this: is when I think of Bluff, I don't think of just the houses and the businesses and the physical structure of Bluff. I also think of this beautiful area that we live in, and it is very beautiful. Nobody's going to argue that, even Mr. Baird. Well, actually he does, but never mind. The things that that are important to me are, in addition to all of you, are the surface of the landscape, the canyon walls, the canyons themselves, the quality of the air, the quality of lack of noise pollution. All of that is Bluff to me, and that includes the bench, Sacred Mesa, the Comb. All of this is within what the orbit that we live in. So that brings up the question, which is more important? And I pose this to the parties who are trying to disconnect. Is the quality of our life more important, or is the almighty dollar what's important? I mean, I know where I come down, and you guys can all make up your own minds. That's my first point. Here's my second point. We sat here and listened to threats made against us that this is going to basically drive the town bankrupt. That's a threat. I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for 50 years. I know a threat when I hear one. Most other people do too. At any rate, I'm here to tell you that I'm willing to contribute to the cost, the legal cost here. And by the legal cost, I don't mean just the court cost. Here's my threat: the public cost, the embarrassment to Sitla. Mr. Baird has said he cannot be embarrassed, so I'll take him at his word. But I'm in it for the fight, okay? And I appreciate your being here. You walked into the Lion's Den, and I really respect that. But I'm here to fight. Thank you.
Bill Lincoln, to be followed by Leanne Sampson.
Good evening. My name is Bill Lincoln. I live on Black Locust near the old elementary school. My thoughts, I would like to speak for the dead. every morning I go for a walk up Cemetery Hill and go by the grave marker of Jean and Mary Fouché. When I first came to town, my family and I were blessed by meeting Jean and Mary, and once every couple of weeks, we'd go for a picnic up almost on that same spot that's on the map. It looks like a little triangle. It's just a little blurb on one of the maps. We always used to go up there to a spot overlooking the farm and have a cookout or some sort of refreshment. And I know, or I felt, when I went by Jean and Mary today, they said, "Give them hell, Bill, give them hell."
Following Leon Sampson, it'll be Barry Beisner.
Voluntarily, right? I'm Barry Beisner. I greatly appreciate this chance to speak with you. I have a letter, it's Appendix I in the exhibits, so you may have seen that already, and I won't restate all of that. But I do, and we learned by hearsay just about 3 weeks ago that St. Christopher's was going to be forcibly separated from the town of Bluff. It was very distressing to us, and you can imagine. And so that's one reason why you see so many black shirts and collars here tonight. It's somewhat slightly reassuring to hear for the first time that perhaps we might not be coerced into disconnecting from the city, which is, we truly, truly want to be a part of the community of Bluff. That's who we are. And we want the well-being of all people here, and we want to be a partner in that. But there's another question that it's a much bigger question than our status in or out of the city boundaries. Page 7, it's been referred to already, item 7 of the staff report. The aquifer, and I'm sorry, I apologize. Protocol. I'm at 1257 Mission Avenue in Farmington. That's the headquarters of the Episcopal Church in Navajo Land. But in my position, I also have oversight of St. Christopher's. The section on page 7, the aquifer, and I quote, "The town of Bluff was originally incorporated to protect natural resources in the area, including the aquifer known as the N aquifer. This bedrock aquifer provides high-quality culinary water to Bluff residents and businesses, and a portion of the aquifer lies under the Bluff bench and the proposed disconnection lands." In my letter, I mentioned that, as some of you may recall, there was an attempt in recent years to gain permission for oil drilling on the land adjacent to St. Christopher's, the land in question. That attempt was opposed and defeated by a broad coalition of organizations, including indigenous communities, faith communities, and numerous persons concerned to protect this incredibly precious resource. Bluff has a vital interest in continuing that protection. I'm quoting from my own letter now. Not only do we see no positive reason for disconnection generally, we can easily imagine how disconnection might open the door to another such attempt to gain permission to bore holes through the aquifer, putting an essential water resource at risk. That resource has been enjoyed and relied upon by St. Christopher's and the wider community for many decades. If it were to be compromised by extraction activities on the property in question, it could be lost forever as a source of reliably clean water. We greatly appreciate your consideration of our concerns. We are certainly eager to find a solution to this conflict that is truly just and equitable, truly in the interest, the vital interest of all. We want to be good neighbors to all, and we hope that this relationship between St. Christopher's and Bluff, which Leon and others have spoken to so eloquently, will continue to grow and flourish for many decades to come. Thank you.
Jacob Nelson, you're up next, followed by Marcia Haydenfeld.
Jacob Nelson, 250 South, 6 West. My wife and I are also the owners of Canyon Smokehouse and some of the newest residents who have set roots here in Bluff. While my wife has spent many of the past few years here, I am new to this community, and that allows me to bring what I believe to be an impartial view of the situation. So please take my thoughts as you will. I'm sure others here today, and actually as we've heard now, have made very impassioned arguments that the council should take to heart about this disconnect. However, the real heart of this hearing is whether the town wants to spend money on a court case and to vote no to a disconnect and whether or not that case is winnable. We've heard a lot of hypotheticals about what could happen if the disconnect happens, but at the end of the day, legally, courts don't care. So to speak to the former, the question of spending money on fighting this disconnect is a question of identity for the town. What does this town stand for? What I've seen so far in my short stay here is that this town is a haven for people who love and appreciate the outdoors, people who enjoy the rich history of the area, for people who enjoy peace and quiet, and for people who are willing to put in a hard day's labor to enjoy what this town has to offer. I don't think anyone has any real idea what the Actons are petitioning, why the Actons are petitioning to disconnect. Because of that, I would have a hard time allowing for that to happen. The space up on the bench is a backdrop to everything that people in this town enjoy. I often drive up there after a long day at work. Whether Mr. Baird believes it or not, there are people who go up there and use those roads and enjoy the peace and quiet that that area has to offer. Allowing for this disconnect would take any say that Bluff has in the future of that area and threaten something that is very valuable to the people who live here. I'm sure that that is why this area was originally included in the incorporation of the town, and the town would be right to fight to retain it. I firmly believe that the people who value this town would have no problem with spending the tax dollars to fight for the reasons why they live here. This brings us to the matter of the case, if the case is winnable, and if it were to go to court. In some ways, that question is irrelevant. As has been said many times today, who cares if it's winnable? If the people of this town truly believe that this fight is just, then win or lose, it is a worthwhile endeavor. From reading Mr. Baird's petition to disconnect, you would think this case is hopeless. He less than eloquently threatens the town tax dollars and cites cases that make him certain of his inevitable victory. What I will assume is that Mr. Baird failed to realize two things. First is that when a group of people believe in something, then the money is not wasted. Putting up a good fight for something you believe in is the best use of that money that I can think of and makes me proud to be a new member of this community. The second thing that I feel Mr. Baird failed to realize is that, and I quote, screaming activists, end quote, can also read. When you look at the burden of proof that the petitioner to disconnect would need to provide the court in order to disconnect, you come across 10-2, 502.7, subsection 3, subsection B, and I quote, that justice and equity require that the territory be disconnected from the municipality. While legally, justice and equity are a very wishy-washy phrase, I would say that, sorry, let me back up. Please remember this, very wishy-washy. I would also look at Mr. Baird's cited case law of Bluffdale Mountain Homes versus Bluffdale City. And I will back up what I wrote here, because after Mr. Baird's comments, previously he has made no argument. Bluffdale would be relevant if they were looking to put homes or something up there. He is now making that argument, previously had not. He obviously found this case and is now looking to set up a court case for allowing the disconnect, when previously there was no just and equitable reason to do so. He obviously found subsection B as well and is trying to create a just and equitable situation. Moving on, I'm gonna stop reading there. What I will say is that looking around the room, I'm one of the younger generation here. There's a few people probably about my age. And as a council, you need to look at what brings us, people like me, to Bluff and what the future of it is. And the future of it is the area around it. As a community, we will need to develop. As a business owner here, I see the need for that. But the council also needs to retain the ability to control that development in a way that allows people like me to enjoy the bench, to enjoy the canyons, to enjoy water in the future, whether hypothetical or not. That's why we come here. It's for this great community that I've heard talk today and what the surrounding area provides. Thanks for your time.
Marcia is our final speaker of the evening.
I'm Marcia Haydenfeld. I live 7 CPX plus 5J, Bluff, Utah. I wish I had that cute little costume that Carol Burnett always wore playing the housemaid, because I'm sweeping up at the end of this evening. And my sweep up is to say thank you to the town council for organizing. You were required to, but you did a great job of doing so. Thank you to an amazing neighborhood of friends, see if I can get through this, for standing up to what is the most blatant use of threats against us. Thank you to Sitla for coming and presenting why you shouldn't do this. I think you did a good job of telling us why you shouldn't do this. Thank you to Mr. Baird for telling us that we're not worthy, because we are. So my sweep up is to say that town council has heard from the public. The public has said, please fight. I can't pledge any financial help to the fight, but I can tell you that with my neighbors, I will help you fight. Thank you.
So what I'd written to myself was that I would give the council an opportunity to ask questions, but I think I'm going to change that and ask Mr. Baird and then the representative from Sitla to make any rebuttal comments that they have or whatever you'd like to use your time for, and then have the council ask any questions and be able to wrap up. Mr. Baird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to be, I think, very brief. Because there wasn't a lot of substance. There was an awful lot of emotion, and I understand that, but very little substance. There seemed to me there was a total of one semi-substantive issue, and that's the water. I did hear a whole bunch of people candidly say that they want to keep the property in so that they can control its future use. My experience in going to hundreds of city council meetings and planning commission meetings and county council meetings and county planning commission meetings is very simple. Control use means deny development. That's what you heard tonight. It was deny development. You heard in the general plan, keep it as it is. You heard vistas, you heard lights, you heard water, and I'll get to water in a minute. What you heard was a whole bunch of people saying, we want to control this property because we think we're better at it than the private property owner. Mr. Crowder, I think that this is a very beautiful area. I grew up in Fruita, Colorado, so I'm quite familiar with very similar areas. My father had the honor mayor or privilege or curse of being mayor of a very small town and getting yelled at and trying to manage the expectations and fight through things. He taught civics. That's where I learned what I consider to be my values and my law on this, and that is, in the United States at least, private property rights have a right to develop, and under Utah law, private property rights and undeveloped property in the edges of cities have a right to get out if they don't want to be in the city. That's just what the law is. Mr. Nelson, I think, I didn't find the Bluffdale case. I litigated the Bluffdale case, along with 3 other cases on disconnection. I know how the system works. I know how painful and how expensive it is. I'm not making any case law up here because I wrote the case law and argued it in front of the Supreme Court. So I'm fairly confident that when I indicate what I think the legal options are for the town, that I'm right. And I could be wrong. You know, law's a bet on what a judge is going to do in the end, is what I said. But under the facts here, the primary fact under Utah case law is vacant land gets to decide where it lives. And this is vacant land. Now let me get to the, let me get back to the only subject, 2 other issues. Mr. Meisner, I didn't control notice of the town. The statute says how the notice is given, and the statute changed within the last few years, and the statute changed in a way that put the responsibility for notice not on my client, where it used to be, but on the town. And the town has complied with their notice requirements. 100% has complied. I didn't know that you didn't know about it until I got a phone call from your lawyer, who happens to be one of my dearest friends for 40 years, literally, in Salt Lake City. And I didn't know how you were going to respond. And when I saw your letter, that was, as I say, that was the first time I didn't know that you didn't know, or I knew that you didn't know. You understand what I'm saying. And had I not been out of town, sir, I would have gotten back to you and discussed it, but I wasn't expecting your letter, and I wasn't expecting the emotion of your presentation. And we were aware, as I mentioned before, of the disconnection, and we believe and we want you to be in Bluff. We are happy for you to be in Bluff. I can't say that enough times. Which leads me back to the only substantive issue I actually heard, other than that everybody hates Sitla more than regular developers, which I guess is gives me cold comfort and also pity for poor Kelly and Brian. The only issue that I heard repeatedly was water, 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 and water. I love the water in the town of Bluff. I wish somebody would give me some because I'm thirsty right now. But with no poison in it, please. But the water issue is not in the control of Bluff. Water rights in Utah are regulated by the state engineer's office, which grants drilling permits if people have valid water rights. It's regulated by, as I said, the Division of Water Rights. It's regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency. The only way that you have, the town has authority over water, is to use it as an excuse to deny a development right. And that's what you're here to do. And I appreciate the candor. You just don't want any development on this bench. And one of your arguments is you don't want the water problem. I understand what your argument is, but the town doesn't have the authority to deal with the water. And I can tell you that my client doesn't have any desire to to harm anybody's water. I don't believe Sitla has any desire to harm anybody's water. I think the water's a great and wonderful and necessary resource. And I trust that the representatives, oh, thank you so much, Mayor. You are the most thoughtful, you are the most, it's not Bluff water, but you know. I know, I'm just kidding. Mayor, you know I trust you, how much I trust you and respect you, and I really appreciate it. So, and now I've lost my train of thought while you're being so courteous. Let's be honest, you want to stop all development on the bench. That's simple. Just be candid and say it, and I think the record is clear, and will be clear to the court if we have to go there, that that's what you want. Let me talk the final thing. Let me make sure it's the final thing, because I don't want to overpromise on this. I believe that this is the final thing. And I made careful notes of what everyone said, and want to respond to just the last issue. And the last issue is, again, many of you have said you don't know what the motivation of the Actons is. And I'm going to tell you the same thing I told you the last time. The Actons don't want to be under your oppression. They don't have a plan at the moment. They don't know what they want to do. They just don't want to have to come here and listen to people endlessly telling them what they can't do. And, you know, they have a right to do that. They have a right to hire me to do that. And just because, I mean, somebody mentioned last time, gosh, you're really, really expensive. Your rate was in the Tribune, and gosh, how come is somebody affording so much money to pay you if you don't have some malevolent plans? The answer is they don't want to be in your town. That's it. They want the same freedoms to develop their property as they had before you brought them and 34 miles of non-private property into this town. And with that, I'm done. Thank you very much. And after Sitla talks, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, I'm happy to hop in my car and head home. Really funny.
Mr. Torgerson.
Once again, I'd like to thank the public for coming out, and I appreciate your comments. I know that they're sometimes painful to hear, but I do appreciate them, and I appreciate the council. First of all, I'd like to touch on one thing, and that is I had the honor and the privilege of having lunch with Jean and Mary Fouché. It's been a number of years, of course, and they would want you to fight, but they were true gentlemen, and when they did fight, it was always courtesy and kind and polite. And even though there's a lot of passion there, I still sense that, and I appreciate that. The first thing we'd like to talk about is what Mr. Baird already talked about. I was making little stars next to the comments that overlapped, that everyone had the same resonating theme on, and the first one was the aquifer. Sitla has, we work closely with the Division of Water Rights, and we have every intent of any project that we do to work closely with them. Aquifer and water rights and protection of water is very important to us as it is to you. And so whatever we do, they are the regulators. They regulate that. They have the science and the background to manage that, and we just kind of go with whatever recommendations they say, whatever development project that it is. One of the comments that came up a couple of times, and I made stars by it, is about being good neighbors. And this is one I didn't take offense to, but I do want to bring back to your recollection that even though Sitla is not public lands, and you may not have a say in them like you would other public lands, we have tried to come and engage the community. The first time we come and did that was another very controversial occasion, and that was when we sold the property with the P1 site and the Bluff Twins. We sat down and we listened to you guys, and what we did is we came up with a list of conditions and deed restrictions, and we sold that property subject to those deed restrictions so that you guys would have more comfort in what we were doing. And we feel that was one of the many times that we've come in and worked with you. We did the exact same thing when we sold the Comb Ridge. We listened to you guys. There was a lot of emotion. We heard you out. We did the same thing. We put a bunch of deed restrictions on it. And so this is just a couple of occasions where we've come and engaged with you. We try to notify you of any time we have an application before us, and we've done that every time. And right now we only have 2 potential projects. One's the solar project. So I don't know if the question was asked about us, about motivation. We only have 2 projects. One is being advertised still, so we don't know what it's going to be. The advertising ends this Friday. It's for a little 40-acre parcel here in town that's below the bluff. And then the other one is the solar farm. And that's the only thing that we have going on. There's no backdoor deals going on. There's no side deals going on. Those are the only 2 deals that we have in the works. And we've given you guys notice of them, and we continue to want to engage with you in those. As far as the bluff trade-in and trade-out areas, that's a very good question, and it makes us look hypocritical, and so I want to address it. So first of all, we look at these as the lands that are up on the bluff, up on the bench, a little bit separately than you do. They're up on the bench. They're not really well connected to the town as much, and the lands that are inside off of the bluff that are closer to town. So there's that 40-acre parcel that we're advertising right now. We did not include it to be disconnected. We feel it's appropriate for it to be inside city limits. I plan on coming and visiting with you guys a lot more. I've had conversations with the mayor. You have a great mayor. She's very passionate, but she's very polite, and I respect that a lot. And so there are properties where we feel are more suitable to acquire and keep in Bluff, and then we feel that there are areas that are outside of the Bluff City limits too far, and there's not really much services that can be gained from that. And so I'm just going to cross off some of these, make sure I cover everything. So, and then this is the one that got me a little bit riled up, and so I'm going to temper what I'm about to say, because I'm very passionate about SITLA. I've worked here for 17 years, and I believe in our mission and our mandate, and I see the inner workings. I see the hard workers of the agency, and it touched on the percent of administrative dollars, and that stuff can all be found online. It's 100% transparent. We're a public trust. It's all online. You can go and look it up, but it's nowhere close to 82%. It's less than 1%, and I encourage you guys to all look at it, because that's something that I'm very passionate about. We are very frugal. We are very conservative. We want to make sure that all of our monies go to the public school system that is possible. And that goes to the other thing. The funding per school is based on a per student capita. So this per student capita. So the smaller schools, they do get a little bit smaller, that's for sure. But the legislature, we don't control this. All SITLA does, we just make the money, and then we turn that over to other people. The legislature is the one that decides how much money goes to rural schools and more urban schools. And they have a formula that rural schools do get a little bit more. But if it was up to me and I was king of SITLA, all the money would go to Monticello and Bluff, and you guys would be really rich in your school. But I'm not, and the legislature controls that. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is just the gravel pit. The gravel pit it's mostly mined out. There's a little bit more that can happen there. It's not a lot. The new operator came online, and he doesn't have a gravel operation that it works daily. And so he rented a machine to crush the gravel, and so he was trying to get the most out of that machine for a long period of time. And so that pit doesn't, it doesn't operate on a daily basis. I'm not a gravel guy. But if you have questions and concerns about that, let me know, and I will pass those on. And because we truly do want to be good neighbors. We truly do. I will continue to come down here and work with you guys and visit with you guys. It may not always be, I might not be able to give you some promise. I always just give it to you straight. And that is SITLA lands, in my opinion, giving it to you straight, probably won't ever be open lands as long as we own it. The way that we get around that is by doing land exchanges, where we get the land to the federal government. But there are lands that you guys, I don't want to see us get rid of, but we will retain them and be keeping those. But that's all I have. Once again, I want to thank this wonderful community. You guys are great, and you guys will continue to have to deal with me, unfortunately. But I look forward to it. I truly do look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Beard, did you need any time? Okay. So this is the council's opportunity to ask any questions of either the SITLA representatives, the mission, or Mr. Baird. So I'm going to look at the rest of you. Okay, Mr. Sayers, do you have a microphone?
Can you hear me? Okay. This is for Mr. Baird. Thank you. Do we know what the Actons, the applicants for the disconnection, plan to do at all to develop this land?
I do not know, and to the best of my knowledge, they have no current plans, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I'll follow up with that. Last time you didn't bring your clients, they passed this land to their relative. Where are they tonight?
They're at home on my advice, because I've never believed in having a client show up at a hearing where they would be run the risk of being personally badgered. I've seen that too many times, council member. I'm not sure it would have happened here, but I gave them specific advice not to be here. I've had clients at other hearings that have been physically threatened. have been treated very rudely and unprofessionally, and I try to insulate my clients from that. It's not out of matter of disrespect, it's a matter of personal safety and under my advice.
I guess I have a question that I probably shouldn't ask, Mr. Baird, but I'm going to anyway. So,
I always will listen to your questions, Mayor. We've talked candidly for 3 years now.
so in the normal course of what I've read about disconnect actions, when we denied the petition to disconnect on the Lymans, there was a lot of expectation that you'd probably appeal it, and instead you came at us a different way.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give me some idea why you did it that way, other than to suck in a lot of land from Sitla?
Sure. I'm not going to divulge any attorney-client privilege, obviously, but it appeared to me that you had a probable, reasonable argument on the issue of an island, and I don't believe in wasting clients' money on an appeal in a litigation that might lose. So I looked for alternatives, and it seems to me that there's two alternatives, and there were two alternatives. One was to change the legislation, to try to seek the legislative change, and I still may do that if I have to, and that would be to change the definition of island to be islands surrounded by private property as opposed to public property. In this situation, I still may do that. If we have a denial here, I may also try to go to the legislature and ask them to change the definition of peninsula to be in accord with the logic of the Supreme Court in the Bluffdale Mountain Homes case, which would be a peninsula for which the cost of service would be increased. But it seemed to be easier if your argument was that we were creating an island. I just solved the island. I tried to find the easiest way to solve the island, and the easiest way to solve the island was to ask Sitla if they would like to join. And for the reasons that they've stated today, they decided to join. That's the reason. Very simple. Tactical, strategic, cost.
Thank you. Anyone from Luann?
Yeah, this is for Mr. Torgerson, unless somebody has something else for Mr. Baird while he's...
If no one has anything else for Mr. Baird, okay, Mr. Torgerson?
Yeah, so I know that you're focused on money, and I know schools cost a lot of money, and I hear the 14,000. What percentage of the budget does Sitla provide to the state of Utah?
Like I said, that's all online. So essentially, less than 1% is our administrative costs. So all the money that we make, what happens is it goes into a permanent fund. And then the theory is this: there was some arguments a long time ago that we didn't want to have this land that's going to be there forever to be to disappear, and then us never to get it back. And so what they do is they take the land, they develop it, sell it, whatever, put it into the permanent fund, and it's permanent fund for a reason. Why that permanent fund can never be touched, and only the interest and dividends then are spun off every year and distributed to the public schools. Last year was right around $95 million went to the state of Utah, and then Bluff, of course, got their portion. And it's based on per capita. We have no say in the formula of how it's dispersed. That's all set by the legislature.
And I understand that, but as far as like the budget of the whole school system, what portion is it that you provide?
Oh, I see what your question is. It's growing all the time. It's growing exponentially, actually, but it's not a lot. It's less. It's right around 5%, but it is growing a lot. And what happened is in about 1994, we had to kind of have a start over. They separated us from other state agencies and kind of set us alone, and they told us to operate our agency like a business. And from that time until now, we have it went from about $90 million in the permanent fund to now close to $3 billion in the permanent fund. So that's why you're seeing right now it's only about 5% of schools. That is going to continue to go up and up and up every year. And that's something that we're really passionate about. We want to have that percentage be a lot higher, but that's what it is as of right now.
Okay, I have one other question, and that is, what's the purpose of trading out these lands in Bluff? You said that you see that it does seem odd that you're trading out and trading in, but can you tell us what you want with these little landlocked pieces right here in the middle of town?
We have no one's come to us and say we want to acquire this. We have no intentions of immediate development. We have absolutely no intentions as of right now. It was just a mapping exercise where we were looking, we needed to pick up some BLM lands in other areas, and we saw that these were just some random parcels. And then, but we're happy to engage the community. We have not petitioned these. Of course, they're not ours yet, but I don't envision us petitioning these to be removed. We would engage the community on what to do with them. We like to work with communities as long as it's a good faith effort back, because some communities try to stonewall us and then it creates an immediate fight. And we feel that's a little bit where we're at right now, just because of the rezone, the zoning ordinances that you passed without a lot of input. But that's our opinion, and that's where we're at.
One follow-up, sorry. Sure. So you mentioned that it was A1 zoning up there, and is that accurate?
So Kelly will have to correct me if I'm wrong. The biggest issue that we have with the zoning is there's no conditional use permit availability for us like there would be. Under the A1 zone in San Juan County, we would be able to do a solar farm. But not only on top of that, they also allow for conditional use permits to be approved, where the Bluff zoning ordinances, as they're currently written, doesn't allow for that. And so it would take, essentially, it would take a complete rewrite, in our opinion, of some of your ordinances, a lot of public hearings, and we just feel that the path moving forward, we will still be engaging the community like we always have. They're not public lands, but we still try to get information out to you guys. We would still do that whether it's in San Juan or not, but we just feel that that is the easiest path to move forward on the solar project.
Well, if it turns out to not be the easiest, we'd appreciate you coming to town.
Yeah, I think my question was answered. Thank you.
And if there's no more questions, once again, I truly mean this with the bottom of my heart. I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate you guys coming out, and it does help us to make better decisions. These decisions might not always be exactly what you want, but it does help us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our guests who showed up and listened in online. I'd like to thank Sitla, Mr. Baird, the Navajo Land folks. A couple housekeeping items. One is that the record remains open in the sense of written comments until August 29th at 5:00 p.m. Then the town, starting with this point of the public hearing, we have 45 days for the council to make decisions. I really appreciate the fact that everybody made it a second night, so I think I'll just be here tomorrow if you'd all like to join me again.
7 o'clock?
Oh, I like 6 better. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So made. Second, Mayor.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
It is 8:19 p.m. We are adjourned.